Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everyone, from the ETV Community Media Center here on June 14th. Man, I'm repping my Red Sox proudly and have been. I put a lot of good energy out into the world last week with episode 111, Angel Numbers, Mike Trout coming back, Marcus Semion's resurrection, the Rockies getting a sweep, and the baseball gods have rewarded that positivity, that good karma with the Red Sox officially calling up the number one prospect in all of baseball, Roman freaking Anthony. And this is a historic moment in the 2025 Red Sox season. It's something that we've been waiting for. I mean, I was advocating for him to potentially be on the opening day roster, and they decided to let him get a little more seasoning at AAA and wait for an injury or a trade or an underperformance to kind of open the way for him to be up there. And an injury did. Wilyer Abreu got put on the 15-day IL, and Roman Anthony was the obvious call-up to replace him. I know this kid's 21 years old. He was born in 2004. Really, really exciting. But the potential of this guy is exactly why he needs these reps at the major league level. He was hitting, 497-foot grand slams and walk-off homers and ninth inning game-tying homers for the Woo Sox all year. He was killing the ball. I think he would have gotten called up earlier. I talked about this if he didn't have a little bit of a shoulder issue that was preventing him from playing offense. He was a DH only in Worcester for part of the season. He's never going to be a Gold Glove level defender, and that was apparent in his first major league game where he was playing right field in replacement of Wilyer Abreu. But again, at the minor league level, he had been playing majority left field, a little bit of center field, almost no right field. And they had him out there at right field in Fenway Park, which is essentially a challenging center field in some other ballparks. And he misplayed a ball, and the Red Sox ended up losing in his debut. But the Red Sox ended up winning the series in part because in game 2 of that series, he was able to get a 2 RBI double for his first major league hit. And although the results have not been there so far through 4 games, he's hitting under 100. The hard hit numbers are there, much like Jack Caglione of the Kansas City Royals, who's finally started to put things together. He is hitting the ball hard, and there's good BABIP, there's bad BABIP in terms of unlucky results, but the hitting will come. He has a true hit tool, and that's where I expect him to do most of his damage in the Red Sox lineup. This is the kind of kid who I think can be hitting cleanup for you and be one of the top 3 or 4 hitters on your team for a very long time. He has that level of potential. The fact that the Red Sox have him, Marcelo Meyer, and Christian Campbell all up with the big league roster finally together, I think is huge. I think it reinvigorates the fan base. I think it gets a lot of people excited. It gets a lot of people in the ballpark. And after winning a series against the Yankees without Roman, now those 3 that the Section 10 podcast love to call Nuttown, the top prospects, are getting their first taste of the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry together at Fenway. And last night, Garrett Crochet absolutely dealing 8 1/3 scoreless innings, and then Aaron Judge steps to the plate and does what Aaron Judge does to tie the game in the 9th. It goes to extras. Carlos Narvaez walks it off, and the Red Sox are in position to win another series against the first place Yankees. And I think this momentum, regardless of the results for these young guys, there's going to be big moments. There's going to be mess ups. They're very, very young. Having those guys developing at the big league level together with guys like Alex Bregman in their ear, Roman Anthony's lockers right next to Alex Bregman. I have a lot of hope now put back into this season when it was looking very, very dire just 3-4 weeks ago. And Roman Anthony is the exclamation point. He is the poster child for the reason why I feel like now we get to really see what this 2025 Red Sox team is with Roman Anthony up at the big league level, with Marcelo Meyer and Christian Campbell starting to get things going. Roman Anthony should be shortly behind them. And I'm just very, very excited as a Red Sox fan, especially with plans to go to Fenway later this month to hopefully see all three of these guys still up with the big league roster. I know there's been talks of a Meyer or a Campbell going down when Bregman comes back. I really hope that's not the case, because I think all three of them just need to figure it out here at the major league level, regardless of results. Speaking of results, my buddy Scott and his Arizona Diamondbacks, not having the season I expected of them and many people expected of them. They're not necessarily a bad team. They're 35-34. They're an average team. 5.5 games back in the NL West. You know, that doesn't sound all that bad with the expectations for the Dodgers, who are currently tied with the San Francisco Giants for first place. But snake-bitten franchise gets snake-bitten again. Not only did this team have the number one offense in baseball last year, but they had a rotation with Zach Gallen at the top of it, a perennial Cy Young candidate. And they added Corbin Burnes to their rotation, a former Cy Young winner, a perennial Cy Young candidate. And the two of them were supposed to lift up the pitching staff and turn this team into a real juggernaut. Instead, Corbin Burnes was very ineffective to the start of his Diamondbacks career. He went on the IL. He came back, was actually very good, and something popped. He is out for the year with Tommy John surgery. And now this Diamondbacks team that doesn't really have a lot of hope, even of the third wild card spot with the way things are going, is looking like one of the biggest sellers potentially in the sport, which is really disappointing for the expectations I had for the Diamondbacks. I thought it's the second best team in this division coming into the year. Zach Gallen has not been giving you the results that you would like to see. Merrill Kelly has been good, but not great. Eduardo Rodriguez has been terrible compared to his career numbers. Their bullpen has taken a step back in the lineup. You know, Corbin Carroll's an MVP candidate. Ketel Marte has missed some time, has been fantastic. Gabriel Moreno's taken a step forward. Josh Naylor and Eugenio Suarez on the corners have been good. Geraldo Perdomo has taken a step forward. But it's not number one off in baseball anymore. So the Diamondbacks are a very, very interesting seller as we approach the trade deadline. They could get a legitimate haul, especially with the pitching talent available, if they make Zach Gallen available. Now, I know that's not a name you want to hear put out there into the ether. Zach Gallen has been one of the best pitchers in the National League the past 5 years, but Zach Gallen also is someone with an expiring contract that I don't think the Diamondbacks are really going to want to pay next offseason with the state of the team, with Corbin Burnes returning from Tommy John, with Jordan Montgomery off the payroll, Brandon Pfaadt, who they extended, is giving you really mixed results as a starting pitcher. I don't think they want to pay another pitcher right now. They overextended to get Corbin Burnes because there was someone that actually wanted to come to Arizona that was a marquee name. But I think Zach Gallen is as good as gone. His ERA is over 5 this year, but I still think a change of scenery with the stuff that he has shown, he could be a 2 or a 3 for a contending team down the stretch that's willing to give up some top tier major league, top tier prospect talent, maybe some expenditures on the major league level. I think they can get a nice haul for him. Merrill Kelly obviously is a more affordable option for other teams. He's been very solid, 3.18 ERA, 2.2 WAR. He also is a free agent. I think the Diamondbacks would love to retain his services, but with the way things are going, they might just be willing to let him go. He's 36 years old, going to be 37 in October. I would sell him now while you can get something for him. Eduardo Rodriguez is going to be harder to sell with the contract and the performance, but you could potentially move him as well. I think they're very likely to hold on to him for innings sake and have, him and Brandon Pfaadt figured out for the 2026 Diamondbacks rotation. But I think you can get some young pitching and hitting talent for those guys. And Eugenio Suarez, who I always mess up his name, is arguably the most talented third baseman that's going to be available at the deadline as well. He's got a ton of power. He plays a pretty good third base defensively, but a guy who can come in, veteran presence in the locker room, hit some home runs, not embarrass you over the hot corner. That's going to be very exciting to a bunch of teams, including the team I've seen him linked to the most, which is the Chicago Cubs. I know Matt Shaw's came back up and he's been hitting a little bit, but they have championship aspirations this year, and third base has been the clear weak spot offensively for them all year. The catching spot with Casey Kelly and Reese McGuire, they've been doing more than the third base position has for the Chicago Cubs team. So I expect them to be one of many teams calling about Suarez as another rental option. And honestly, Josh Naylor is going to be very exciting to a lot of teams as well. When there's not a ton of first basemen that are going to be available at the deadline, there's a ton of teams from my Boston Red Sox who are kind of in the middle all the way to the top tier teams that could use some help at the first base / DH spot. So the Diamondbacks are slowly turning into one of the most exciting people in the trade market. And I think they should take advantage of it, because I talked about it last year at the trade deadline with the new playoff format and more teams being alive and being in it. It is a seller's market, but teams are reluctant to sell. If I'm the Diamondbacks, you have to rip that Band-Aid off. You have to be one of the first to market. You have to go after the teams with your needs. You have some bullpen pieces that could be appealing to other teams as well. I would keep Martinez in the back, but be willing to move almost anyone else that was wanted. You can really set yourself up for the next era of Diamondbacks baseball. You have Ketel Marte and Corbin Carroll locked up to be the faces of that in that lineup. Figure everything else out. Perdomo's young. Moreno's young. You trade your corner guys. You trade a couple outfielders. You trade some pitching. And you could fill up your farm system, get some younger major league guys that have potential for these older vets that are win now pieces. I think there's a lot to be excited about as Diamondbacks fan in the trade deadline, as long as they're willing to sell. I know 5.5 doesn't sound that far out, but you're in 4th place in the NL West. And in terms of the wild card, things are just not looking good for you in the National League. There are just too many teams ahead of you. Even St. Louis and Milwaukee right now in the NL Central are ahead of you. Cincinnati is right on your tail as a 500 baseball team. And the Atlanta Braves have not given up on their season yet, surprisingly. At 30 and 38, they're trying to come back in the standings. So they're not going to sell. You have to sell, I think, if you're the Diamondbacks. And you can get a lot of talent and potential and controllable assets for these expiring contracts if you move first to market. Another team that I'm excited about at the trade deadline is the Angels. They're another about 500 team, 33 and 35 right now. Mike Trout's obviously locked up there. You have some young pieces, Nolan Shanwell and Logan O'Hoppe, Christian Moore, their top prospect, just got called up. So you're going to have some guys to build around, but there's a ton of rental guys that have actually been pretty good baseball players this year. Yoan Moncada, who's not a natural third baseman, but he can play third and second base. You have Jorge Soler, who's been hitting. I talked about Yusei Kikuchi. A team might want Kenley Jansen, who's been pretty decent at the back end of the bullpen. They have a ton of options. Tyler Anderson as well in the starting rotation is a guy that I expect to see moved. They can get a lot of decent flyers for these guys that they just invested some money in. And I talked about this, why teams aren't willing to take these 1-year rental flyers on these proven major league guys, because if they hit, you win. If they're mediocre, you break even. And if the team is bad, you can sell them and get a controllable asset. Like, it's a win-win-win. So I don't understand why there's not more teams, especially the teams that are in the middle and the bottom of the standings, that aren't putting out these one-year flyer deals, even if it's just to flip people. And the Angels did a great job of doing that this offseason, where they had a chance to be a surprise wild card team in the American League. I'm not saying they have zero shot of climbing back in the standings, but they're pretty far out in the wild card. I would sell if I'm the Angels and you have a lot of assets to do so. And I think that's the best time to sell, is when you have multiple assets. Some teams will just have one guy that's the clear sell piece, but the Angels have a ton of guys that they can liquidate and turn into some more guys to build around their young core. And the final team I want to talk about with the trade deadline coming up is the Baltimore Orioles. I think they should blow it up. Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Grayson Rodriguez, because he's coming off injury, Felix Bautista, who's not been his best coming off injury. Other than those four guys, I would make everyone available. I know Ryan O'Hearn's going to get traded. He's one of the top 10 hitters in the American League right now. He's been awesome. He's going to get them a nice little piece. But I would trade pretty much anyone else. Teams are calling about Jordan Westberg, a controllable third baseman who was an all-star last year, and want to give you something. I'd be interested. If a team buys into Jackson Holliday's breakout this year and wants to give you some real pieces in the rotation option realm, I would listen. If teams are interested in Colton Cowser, who a lot of people think should have won American League Rookie of the Year last year, who's been coming back off the IL hitting, I'd listen. This Orioles team, I expected them to be in the playoffs despite their terrible starting rotation that was even worse than it looked on paper. But you got to blow things up. And if a team's willing to give you legitimate pieces for Zach Eflin, who's a rental pitcher, for Sagano, who's a rental, for Cano out of the bullpen, who's been very good in his major league career, you got Kitteridge and different guys, I'd be willing to move them. I know this is not what you want to hear, Orioles fans. I know it's been a miserable season as is, but you have to. Sometimes it's addition by subtraction. And this team has shown over the last couple of years that they haven't been able to win together in the big moments. They haven't won a playoff game. And now they have this terrible season that is mainly anchored by bad pitching, but also that offense has taken a step back. Cedric Mullins is another obvious trade piece for them, a guy who might make the all-star team, very good hitter, outfielder, veteran guy. I'd trade all of the above. I'd blow things up, and I'd hope that this next wave of talent and supplemented veterans that you can add in free agency via trade or just signing some contracts. Like I said, these teams that are in the middle should be signing a bunch of speculative guys, but they shouldn't be the main moves. The Charlie Mortons of the world shouldn't be the main moves. This team needs a lot, and I think they could also really set themselves up good for future years if they are one of the first teams to market here at the trade deadline. That is coming up next month. Here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we have to throw it back down the third baseline to this day in baseball history. June 14th had a litany of options for me to choose from. It was very overwhelming, actually. For those of you that are a fan of the hit baseball movie The Natural, it was based off of slugger Eddie Waitkiss's story. And on this date, in 1949, Eddie Waitkiss was famously shot with a .22 caliber rifle by an obsessed 19-year-old fan. That story is of legend, and it changed his baseball career drastically and inspired the movie The Natural. On this date in 1952, Hank Aaron's contract was bought from the Indianapolis Clowns for $10,000, which back then was a lot of money. Hank Aaron went on to have one of the greatest careers we have ever seen. Duke Snider hit his 400th career home run on this date in 1963, towards the end of his career, rounding things out. Willie McCovey hit his 513th home run on this date in 1979, establishing him as the National League's all-time left-handed home run leader. But there is one number that will forever be remembered on this day. In 1996, the number 2131 got etched into baseball lore as Cal Ripken Jr. of the Baltimore Orioles broke the record for most consecutive games played, which had stood for decades since Lou Gehrig's mark for those 20s and 30s Yankees. This is arguably the most unbreakable record in baseball. I know baseball has a ton of unbreakable records, from Nolan Ryan's strikeouts and Cy Young's wins with how pitchers are utilized in today's game, with Rickey Henderson's stolen base record with how far ahead out of the pack he is. But suiting up in today's game for 1,000 straight games is unheard of. Over double that. And I know Cal Ripken towards the end, there were some games where he'd start and he'd play a couple innings and then he would get removed from the game to help him keep the streak alive. I understand that was happening. But Cal Ripken Jr., during that streak, was still, in my humble opinion, the greatest shortstop we've ever seen. His streak started in 1983, which was his first MVP award. He won the All-Star and the Silver Slugger. Had an 8.2 win season. He followed it up in 1984 with a 10-win season at shortstop, which he finished 27th in MVP voting as a 10-WAR shortstop. Oh, man. Absolutely unbelievable. It was a great season. Not quite as good in the counting stats as the year before when he won MVP, but still an unbelievable season where he should have finished a lot higher. And it went all the way until 1997. He didn't stop in 1996 when he broke the record. He kept going and finally missed some games in 1999. But just an unreal streak that was broken at 21-31, but went even longer than that. And it's just truly, truly unbelievable. 2,632 games. Just to break Lou Gehrig's record again is never going to happen, but then they'd have to play another 501 games to tie Ripken. Unbelievable. He got the name Iron Man for a reason. He did something that no one thought was possible. He did it playing one of the most demanding positions in the sport at shortstop. I know he switched to third base towards the end of it, but hats off to Cal Ripken Jr., one of the greatest to ever do it, and a truly inner circle baseball number was etched into history on this date in 1996. I'm going to rant here on the way out because I was extremely excited when I saw that Craig Kimbrel was getting called up for the Atlanta Braves after being, mixed results at the minor league level this year. He signed a minor league contract. I was excited. I wasn't expecting Craig Kimbrel to start saving games for the Braves or necessarily be a lights out perfect reliever. But I was happy to see him back in a Braves uni. I expected him to be up for at least a week or two to give one of the Braves' arms a breather and show if he still had anything. Craig Kimbrel throws one scoreless inning. I know that he walked and gave up a hit, and there was a caught stealing and a pickoff move that he made to get those runners out. But it was a scoreless inning nonetheless, thrown against the Giants. And the very next day, he is DFA'd by the Braves. I'm not saying Craig Kimbrel is necessarily a franchise icon. A lot of people have been saying that. Craig Kimbrel spent 4.5 seasons with the Braves. I know it feels like a lot longer, but they moved off of him relatively fast. Craig Kimbrel, regardless, though, is one of the most accomplished relievers of the past 25 years. And if you're talking of the past 10, 15 years, you could argue he is the most accomplished reliever. Started his career with the Braves. The Braves gave him this shot to rehabilitate himself and come back. He throws a scoreless inning and they can him. That is absolute Bush League behavior. And I understand the Braves haven't given up on this season. I understand they're still trying to push towards the postseason. They have their core locked up. There's no obvious sells outside of maybe Ozuna. So they're trying to win baseball games, and under the hood, Craig Kimbrel doesn't have the best metrics to show you that he'll help you win baseball games. But one game where he doesn't have a blow-up inning, if he had a blow-up inning, no one would be talking about this. But he had a scoreless inning. He struck out batters. He showed you he could still do what he's known for doing. Why don't you keep him as a 6th or 7th inning arm for a week or a month and see what happens? Give him that length that he deserves from being a former Brave, a guy who's a fan favorite. It disgusted me to see a guy who's likely going to end up in Cooperstown get treated like that by a team that had a history with him. I could understand if it was the Dodgers, that had him for a little bit and then brought him back in and had to make room for another star reliever coming in. But the Braves bullpen has sucked. Let him pitch. Give him an opportunity to earn a job somewhere else if you don't want to keep him long term. That's fine. I'm not saying Craig Kimbrel necessarily is going to save a game ever again. I hope he does. But to treat him like that, it was absolute Bush League. And the Braves have gotten away with murder, essentially, in so many areas where if they were a bigger market team, treating players the way that they're treating, it would be a much bigger national story. They'd be getting a lot of flack. But because they're this perfect mid-market that seems to do things the right way most of the time, they don't get any real flack when they do stuff like this on a semi-regular basis. We were talking about all the Ronald Acuna and Jared Kelenic drama earlier this season. There was the Charlie Culberson DFA after having his kid throw out the first pitch to him a couple days before. That they just don't care about the players. Alex Anthopoulos cares about the money. He cares about the numbers. That's it. The people factor is completely out in Atlanta. And I think it's part of the reason why they're having the struggles that they are. Is just the culture there is not what it looks like from the outside. But thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I know my Braves listeners out there loved that ending. I appreciate each and every one of you for spending part of your Solo Shot Saturday with me. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. It really helps the show. For you audio-only listeners, please leave me a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you may be listening. It helps the show a great deal. And I'll see you guys next Saturday with some more baseball talk. I'm Don Manna. Have a good one. Happy Father's Day to all the great dads out there.